All right. I did neglect one thing, and that is, security is always a very important part of our community life, and we do need people to serve on our security team. And I will say, I'm saying this, to everyone, but there is a little process of, it's not just sort of saying, yeah, I'm willing to do it, okay. There's some things that we would need to talk about, and so so now that I'm saying that, and you were to say, hey, I want to serve, well, don't be discouraged if we say, well, not yet, or I'm not sure, or you know what I'm saying. But we do need people on our security team. We really appreciate that form of service. You need to be either a member or somebody that has been coming for enough time that kind of like everybody knows who you are. You know what I mean? A regular attender who's a regular attender. Okay? And so there's that. Then also, each year we ask our folks to help us with the cost of our policemen a little bit. And now you're going to correct me if I'm wrong. $60, is this correct? $60, $60 a person, or 120 a family. Is that correct? Okay, got that right. All right, if you can, we would really appreciate that. That way we're all helping out in that endeavor. And we certainly appreciate our security team, and we appreciate David Schultz and others who from the Columbus Police Department who help us out. All right, very good. Okay, so last week we began a little series on the Shema, right? On the Shema. And the reason, one of the reasons is, it's, of course, why not, right? Do I need a reason, right? One reason is we're at a time of year that is filled with distractions. And also, sometimes it can be like an emotional roller coaster at this time of year. It can be like, an emotional roller coaster at this time of year, and it's important to stay focused, to keep our feet on the ground, and then also, not only are there many distractions, and not only is there the issue of sometimes, emotionally, it can be a very interesting time of year. But then there's also the gift-giving. It's the gift-giving time of year, right? And so oftentimes there's like lots of pressure, even though we would all say, oh, it's not about that. Well, the reality is that we're maybe spending money that it's difficult, but there's so the whole thing is a very challenging time of year, right? And so why not talk about what the Bible calls the most important things, right? And be focused on them, because that's where real joy, you talk about joy, you want joy. If you love me, you'll keep my commandments. And I'm saying this so that you will have my joy and your joy will be made full, right? So, very, very, very important. I know that for, we talk about Hanukkah coming, so, Hanukkah, Christmas, whatever, other holidays are very, just very prevalent at this time, and nothing wrong with holidays, and nothing wrong with celebrating and family and all those things. Yeah. But very important for us indeed to stay focused. So last week we began talking about the Shema, and I gave a sort of a little historical a piece about the Mishnah and the Talmud and the Shema. And we know from this rabbinic literature that earlier on, going way back early, several centuries earlier, that the Shema was chosen from the scriptures to be this statement, this loyalty oath to God, right? And as it is to this day. And most of us, growing up in a Jewish environment, growing up a Jewish, not even tradition, I'm not talking about, I'll wait. Is it off? Are we okay? Okay, good. All right. Okay. I'm not talking about just, Orthodox, but almost all Jewish people of every stripe, so to speak, knows Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, and probably knew it in Hebrew before even knowing it in English. It is so ingrained upon us. And last week we talked about all of that. And we talked about the famous explanation of what it means in Deuteronomy chapter 6 in verse 5. And I'll just read that again. Right, of course, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And we said it's not a prayer, it's a declaration. And I wonder if we remember that from last week when we were saying it today, and especially when we're holding the Torah and saying it, declaring our loyalty to God. And then in verse 5, you have the basic explanation of that. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. And so we talked about that last time. Now, today I want to begin with looking at a story that we read about Yeshua that helps us to understand this. The truth of the Shema is all over the whole Bible. It is not only where you read, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. It's not only where you read, love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all your soul, and all your might, or as we read it in the Brit Chadashah, with all your mind, included there. But it's everywhere. And one great passage that we read about in the Brit Chadashah in Matthew, Mark, and Luke is a story about a young man who Luke tells us was a ruler. That's why he's called the rich young ruler. That's not in one place. It takes all three. It takes Matthew, Mark, and Luke to get rich, young, and ruler. But in Matthew chapter 19, we read about this story. And I think it's kind of helpful for us in understanding the meaning of the Shema. Okay, so we read here in verse 16 of Matthew chapter 19, and behold, one came to him and said, Teacher, what good thing shall I do that I may obtain eternal life? And he said to him, Why are you asking me about what is good? the only one who is good. There is only one who is good. But if you wish to enter life, keep the commandments. Now, there's something we have to always remember whenever we read stories like this in the Gospels. Yeshua knows what's going on inside a person. He knows why they're coming to him. He knows what they're concerned about. And when he gives an answer, he is always, remember this, he is answering the person. He's not just answering a question, like at face value. He's answering the person. All right? Because there's more to this young man than meets the eye. Okay. All right. Keep the commandments. And he said to him, which ones? And Yeshua said, you shall not commit murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness, honor your father and your mother, you shall love your neighbor. The young man said to him, all these things I have kept. What am I still lacking? Yeshua said to him, if you wish to be complete, go and sell your possessions and give to the poor, and you shall have treasure in heaven. Come and follow me. But when the young man heard this statement, he went away grieved, for he was one who owned much property. And Yeshua said to his disciples, truly I say to you, it is hard for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. And again I say to you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. When the disciples heard this, they were astonished. Like, this is too hard. Now, let me just pause there and say this. That, conventional wisdom about Yeshua is that he relieves us from the burden of the laws. Right? So it's like easier. Right? I mean, isn't that what generally speak? Now we don't have all those laws anymore. Now, just embrace Yeshua and we're good to go, right? But the fact of the matter is that in Yeshua the bar is raised. The bar is raised. Very interesting. So they say, who can be saved? Like, this is unbelievable. What you're saying, Yeshua. And looking upon them, Yeshua said to them, with men this is impossible, but with God all things are possible. A very important verse in this whole conversation. Okay? When he says this, he's not talking about, I want to see if I can lift the end of a Volkswagen. So I know it's impossible with man. But because I know the Lord, he will give me supernatural strength to lift up this car off the ground. Or I am a professional football player, and it is impossible for me to be a great player, but with God, all things are possible. May I suggest that neither of those illustrations have anything to do with this passage? Okay? A misappropriation of the text, as we'll see. All right? Then Peter answered and said to him, behold, we have left everything and followed you. What then will there be for us? Yeshua said to them, truly I say to you that you who have followed me in the regeneration, when the Son of Man will sit on his glorious throne, you shall also sit upon 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. And everyone who has left houses or brothers or sisters or father or mother or children or farms for my name's sake shall receive many times as much and inherit eternal life. But as many who are first will be last, and the last first. Okay, so in this portion first, in the actual story of this young man. He comes to Yeshua, and rather than looking at him like skeptically, like as a negative person, you know, he is looking, I'm going to suggest, he is really looking for an answer to a question. He's not testing Yeshua here, but that he's really upset. He is really burdened. Okay? And he wants to know, you know, what do I have to do? Now, Yeshua knows all this, right? So the first thing that Yeshua says is what he expects, right? Keep the commandments, right? Keep the commandments. This young man was a great rule keeper. He was good at keeping rules. He could look at many of the commandments and say, well, I don't do that, I don't do that, I don't do that, you know. But what am I lacking? What am I lacking? I think that for many of us, we are actually, even as Messiah followers, kind of in the place of this young man sometimes. And that is, many of us, I would say almost all of us, we are good rule keepers. We can say, well, I do my best to pray. When I go down the list of the Ten Commandments, I'm pretty good at most of these things, right? And so we may actually say to ourselves, well, I'm okay then. Because as long as, I've embraced the Lord, right? And I must be living a good and holy life because I'm not doing this, I'm not doing this, and I'm not doing this, or I'm not doing this. And perhaps many people who really are seeking and really desiring satisfaction with God, or even acceptance in a way. Perhaps many people who identify themselves as religious might say, well, let's say, if you're Jewish, you might say, well, I go to the synagogue, I go to the Shacharit service, or I say the Shema every day, or I pray the Amidah every day. I'm in pretty good shape. Or if you're, not Jewish, I go to church, every week, and I help little old ladies across the street, or try to do good deeds, and so that's not bad. Now Yeshua pulls, makes a left turn here. When the young man says, all these things I have kept, what am I still lacking? I'm going to suggest he really is asking this question. What am I lacking? I'm doing all the right things. I'm like a religious person. What am I lacking? Yeshua said to him, if you wish to be complete. Now, by the way, if you read the Gospel of Mark version of this, right here it says Yeshua loved him. Okay? It says Yeshua loved him. He is not an antagonist. Okay? Yeshua loved him. And he says, so I'm throwing that little part in from Mark. Right? If you wish to be whole, right? Go and sell your possessions and give to the poor, and you shall have treasure in heaven. Come and follow me. But when the young man heard this statement, he went away grieved, for he was one who owned much property. I'm going to suggest that this was not a case of him denying Yeshua here. Okay, that's not what's happening. I'm going to suggest that this young man knew that Yeshua is right, but that he couldn't do it. It was too radical. It was too radical to do. What? Sell everything I have? Don't, see, we're used to, a better story for us is the widow's mite. We kind of like that story. Okay, because she had hardly anything, and she gave. And we're used to hearing, it's like people, Yeshua came for those who are poor, and those who are blind and lame, as you read it in the scripture. But here we see that here is someone who had wealth, right? Who had wealth, and here Yeshua. Why does Yeshua do it this way? Why doesn't he just say it from the get-go? Because he wants to bring this man to the place where he recognizes where he is vulnerable. Where he is vulnerable. It's easy for us to talk about the Shema and say with all of our heart and all of our soul and everything that we have, and because we're dedicated to God. We would just identify that as being dedicated to God. This young man thought, I'm dedicated to God. But now Yeshua says, no, I want you to really do something here. I want you to do something that is hard. Now, this was not to earn eternal life. It wasn't like believe in Yeshua and do this and then you're good to go. No. What Yeshua is saying, what I have demanded from the beginning is wholeheartedness toward God. Always it's been wholeheartedness toward God. When Yeshua says, follow me, and how he comforts the disciples afterwards, is that if you follow me wholeheartedly and you really live a radical life of faithfulness, where you don't hoard what you can't keep, and you give away what is yours for, it could be yours forever. The fact is, you will be, there is an inheritance waiting for you. So therefore, if you end up being last now, don't worry about that. This is all temporary, right? Because what lasts comes from God. Now, many years ago, I'm talking many years ago, when I was in the throes of deciding, which direction I'm going to go with my life, after I was a Messiah follower, and after I had this conviction about vocational ministry, which meant basically, forget about, it's like burn all the bridges, and follow me. And I will say that I was living in Buffalo, New York, and I graduated from the university there. And after graduation and all of that, I can remember packing up my car and physically driving away. And at least in those days, I haven't been back there too much since, but there was a road called the Skyway. It was a way that you would hook up to the New York State Thruway and go west. You sort of took this panoramic view of the whole city, and I felt like, man, it's like it's the end of the movie, and the credits are scrolling on the screen. It was like I knew that it was, something was coming, but it was really like the end of something in a lot of ways. That happened a few years earlier when I became a believer and told my friends, forget about it. Now it was, what do you mean you're not going to go to graduate school? What do you mean? This was like from the time you were 6 months old. This was the plan, right? And when Yeshua says, follow me, may I suggest there are times when he literally means it. It's not a figure of speech, okay? And so during this period of time, I read a book. And as you can tell, I've read it more than once, and it's called The Cost of Discipleship. Maybe you've read it too. The Cost of Discipleship by Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Okay? All right. So he talks, as a whole chapter on this story in the Gospels. And I'm just going to read a little part. He says, if, as we read our Bibles, we heard Yeshua speaking to us in this way today, we would probably try to argue ourselves out of it. Like this. It is true that the demand of Yeshua is definite enough. But I have to remember that he never expects us to take his commands legalistically. What he really wants me to have is faith. But my faith is not necessarily tied up with riches or poverty or anything of the kind. We may be both poor and rich in the spirit. It is not important that I should have no possessions. But if I do, I must keep them as though I had them not. In other words, I must cultivate a spirit of inward detachment so that my heart is not in my possessions. Yeshua may have said, sell thy goods, but he meant, do not let it be a matter of consequence to you that you have outward prosperity. Rather, keep your goods quietly, having them as if you had them not. Let your heart be in your goods. We are excusing ourselves from single-minded obedience to the word of Yeshua on the pretext of legalism and a supposed preference for an obedience in faith. The difference between ourselves and the rich young man is that he was not allowed to solace his regrets by saying, never mind what Yeshua says, I can still hold on to my riches, but in a spirit of inward detachment. Despite my inadequacy, I can take comfort in the thought that God has forgiven me my sins, and I can have fellowship with Messiah in faith. But no, he went away sorrowful because he would not obey. He could not obey. This young man was quite honest. And he goes on. I could read the whole chapter. But the point is that when you read this, the text is not saying to each of us individually, sell everything we have. We're reading a story about a person. But he may be saying something to you or you or you or me that at first glance is that, no, he can't be saying that. He can't be saying that. That's too hard. And you see, what Yeshua is doing in those moments is he's saying, yes, you're a good rule keeper. And it's important to keep the rules. But there's something more. There's a heart involved. There is a desire. There is a desire to follow me and my ways, which leads us to another book. This one, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, great, right? Abraham Joshua Heschel, right? The dynamic duo here in a way, right? So, he wrote a lot of books, not only the prophets, but he also wrote a book called between God and man. Okay? Between God and man. So he has a little section here on heartfelt devotion. Heartfelt devotion to God. All right. Kavanah is an important word, right? We may have heard of it. I have like a 300, 400-page book just on Kavanah. Heartfelt devotion to God. I'm just going to call it that, okay? Heartfelt service to God. It's often used in the context of when we pray, we need to pray with Kavanah, not just the words on the page. Not just, let's pat ourselves on the back because we said the Amidah today. You know what I mean? Or the Shema, or anything, all right? But we can apply it to a lot more than prayer. Heartfelt devotion to God. All right. So he says here, Kavanah then is more than paying attention to the text of the liturgy or to the performance of the mitzvah, the performance of a command from God. Okay? Kavanah is attentiveness to God. Its purpose is to direct the heart rather than the tongue or the arms. It is not an act of the mind that serves to guide the external action, but one that has meaning in itself. Mitzvah means commandment. In doing a mitzvah, our primary awareness is the thought of carrying out that which he commanded us to do. And it is such awareness which places our action in the direction of the divine. Kavanah, in this sense, is not the awareness of being commanded. Like, in other words, I have heartfelt devotion to God, so I see what he told me to do, and I'm focused on what he told me to do. What he's going to say here is, Kavanah is not the awareness of being commanded, but the awareness of him who commands. Not of a yoke we carry, but of the will, capital W, of the will we remember. The awareness of God rather than the awareness of duty. Such awareness is more than an attitude of the mind. It is an act of valuation or appreciation of being commanded, of living in a covenant, of the opportunity to act in agreement with God. Okay? Then he goes on to talk a little bit about appreciation. And then he says this, it is in such appreciation that we realize that to perform is to lend form to a divine theme. That our task is to set forth the divine in acts, to express the Spirit in tangible forms. For a mitzvah is like a musical score, and its performance is not a mechanical accomplishment, but an artistic act. The music in a score is open only to him who has music in his soul. It is not enough to play the notes, but one must be what he plays. It is not enough to do the mitzvah. One must live what he does. The goal is to find access to the sacred deed. But the holiness in the mitzvah is only open to him who knows how to discover the holiness in his own soul. To do a mitzvah is one thing, to partake of its inspiration, another. And again, he goes on. And may I suggest what Yeshua is saying to this man is, it's good that you're keeping these rules, but it's about heart. It's about your heart. It's about your devotion. Yes, you are keeping all of these things, and it's not about, you can say you love God, you do this, you do that, but do you have a heart for God? Are you committed to him in such a way that whatever he asks, you'll do? Are there parts of our lives where Yeshua is not the Lord? For this young man, I'll go so far as to say he loved God. But there was a part of his life that he could not entrust to God. When we say that we love God with all of our heart and all of our soul and with all of our might, we need to ask ourselves, what parts are so, I'm not going to even use the word important, are so sensitive to me that I can't just say, God, have your way. That I can't just say, have your way. And that's why he says to this man, come to me. He says, come to me because Yeshua, the good news is that by coming to Yeshua, he will be empowered to be able to do that. He will be empowered to be able to do that. Because that's what he really wants to do. The conundrum is, will he come to Yeshua? Will he follow Yeshua? When we follow Yeshua, ideally we're saying to him, I'll be a living sacrifice. I belong to you. Whatever it is, where you go, I'll follow. But we know that in real time, in real life, that takes us a lifetime plus, right? To really, really, really embrace. You see? And so when we talk about the Shema and we apply it to our lives, really in Messiah Yeshua, the good news is not that there is no more Torah way of life, not that there is no responsibility or obligation to live in a particular way, but know that now we can really do it. Now we do not have to go away grieved. We can be empowered to live that way in Yeshua. That's why when Paul says, to live is Messiah, to die is gain. Right? He's saying, yes, now we can live indeed this way. And there are many other scriptures that we could quote as well regarding that. Another one would be in a passage like Galatians, in the second chapter, right? When he says, I've died with Messiah, yet it is no longer I who live. I have been crucified with Messiah, and it is no longer I who live. That is quite a statement. That is quite a statement of consciousness, of devotion, of love of God. But Messiah lives in me, and the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and delivered himself up for me. I do not nullify the grace of God, for if righteousness comes through the Torah, then Messiah died needlessly. He said, so his point here is not any kind of nullification of anything. Righteousness, being right with God, never came through just simply doing commandments. It has always come through giving of ourselves to God. We may be surprised to learn all of the passages in the New Covenant that talk about the heart. Sometimes we get the idea that everything in the Torah is about legalism, right? And everything in the New Covenant is then about love. Couldn't be farther from the truth. Back in the Shema, when we read again, with all your heart and all your soul and all your might, but then in verse 6 it says, and these words which I am commanding you today shall be on your heart. these words shall be on your heart. In other words, these words need to be weighty. These words need to be on the forefront, of my mind. I need to take them to heart. Treat them as weighty. Treat them as serious. In Deuteronomy 32:46, Moses pretty much ends, his big speech there with, put these words on your heart. And we read about the heart in a lot of places. In 1 Chronicles 22, verse 19, a passage everybody knows. Now set your heart and your soul to seek the Lord your God. So the heart is certainly prominent when we're going all the way back to the Torah and to Moses, right? But you see, what Moses realized toward the end of Deuteronomy, even though, yes, this is what we're supposed to do, Moses acknowledges, after 40 years of dealing with this people, Moses acknowledges and opines, one might say, right? You have not given them eyes to see, ears to hear, or a heart of understanding. Okay, they need something else. They need something more. And without doing now a whole thing on Deuteronomy 29 and 30, we're going to cut to the chase of what God says he will do. And when you cut to the chase in Deuteronomy chapter 30 and verse 6, moreover, the Lord your God will circumcise your heart and the heart of your descendants to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, in order that you may live. It's not a coincidence that this sounds like the Shema. Because from the beginning, one might say that the whole Torah of Moses, the law of Moses, the instruction of Moses, and these admonitions in the first part of Deuteronomy, the whole thing, we could say, is a vision statement of the Olam Haba, how the world is supposed to be. And when God called out Israel, he said, now I want you to begin, even though you may not have all the tools, I want you to begin to live the way it's going to be in the future. I want you to live that way. Right? And so there are plenty of people that are pious or love God and are giving and all of that. But the wonderful thing about the coming of the Messiah is we can have a joy unspeakable. We can have a shalom that can't be described with words, as we read in different passages in the New Covenant. Because in Yeshua, we can have this inward and outward fulfillment of that kind of devotion, warts and all. That should be good news to us. If I really desire to love God, Yeshua says, follow me, see, and you'll be able to do what I ask you to do. And maybe here today, as people that have embraced Yeshua, and maybe it's been years, maybe there's something that God has been saying to you about, I'd like you to do this. And we are saying, but that's not me. That's not who I am. Right? No, in Messiah, if he has called you to do something, to be something, to engage in something, he will give you the tools. And he will open up the opportunities so that we can read the Shema and have a level of devotion that can only come from his prompting. That is what Yeshua does. When you read in Jeremiah, right? when he says, and I'll finish with this, maybe, I think so anyway. In Jeremiah chapter 31, when he says, "But this is the covenant which I will make with the house of Israel after those days, declares the Lord. I will put my law within them, and on their heart I will write it, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people." Do you know, we don't have time to look at them, but because I get to talk on this next week, it'll just spill over. That there are places in the Tanakh where the prophet says, "Write the Torah on your heart." He says, "Write the Torah on your heart." The difference here is God says, "I will write the Torah on your heart. I will do this work in you. I will empower you to live the way I have decided from the beginning." That is good news. Indeed. And so, something that we might want to pray ourselves during this season, in Psalm 139, it says at the end, I'll just read the end. "Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my anxious thoughts, and see if there be any hurtful way in me, and lead me in the everlasting way." What a great prayer that is. At this time of year, perhaps, rather than being focused so much on external things, perhaps we might be able to take some time and ask God, is there a place, just like this rich young man, is there a place in my life that I haven't really given to you? And is there something you'd like me to trust you for? Whether an act of service or a big decision, or something like speaking to somebody about the Messiah that's kind of like, whoa, I don't know about this. Or having to do with the things that we own, just like this rich young man. Whatever it might be, may we be wholly given over indeed to God. We'll continue this next week as it plays itself out in the Shema, but what a great challenge indeed for us, and how thankful we are to the Messiah. That as we read in the Gospel of John, the Torah was given by Moses, right? But realized in Messiah Yeshua, empowered within us in Messiah Yeshua. May we find joy in living his way, and may our joy indeed be full. Let's pray. Lord God, may we not rationalize away the words that maybe you speak into our hearts. But Lord, I know from my own experience, God, when I took a step, whether it be embracing Yeshua, coming to really believe in him, and then subsequent to that, really making a life-changing decision. Lord, thank you that there is a joy and a peace unspeakable that goes with it, even when it's hard. And there are times when we doubt things like that. But thank you, God, that we can go back to the moment of decision and say, no, yes, this indeed is what God has called me to. Lord, may this indeed be, as we enter into a new year, Lord, may it be perhaps a new day for us in our heartfelt devotion to you. We pray in Messiah's name. Amen.